He thought he was inheriting a crumbling estate nobody wanted, but when Rocky finally opened the vault hidden 3 stories below the mansion, what he found wasn't just $285 million in stolen assets. It was a choice that would either save his family or destroy them forever. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door of Rocky's cramped 2-bedroom apartment, like it had been delivered by someone who didn't want to be seen. Rocky almost missed it entirely, stepping over the thin manila envelope as he rushed out the door, already 20 minutes late for his shift at the warehouse. It was Emma who noticed it first, her 12-year-old eyes sharp as ever, even at 6 in the morning. "Dad," she called out, waving the envelope, "this has your name on it. Certified mail." Rocky stopped, one hand on the doorknob, his weathered face drawn tight with exhaustion. Certified mail meant trouble. It always did. Overdue bills, court summons, eviction notices. He'd seen them all in the 2 years since Sarah died. 2 years of drowning, of working double shifts and still coming up short, of watching his kids eat cereal for dinner 3 nights a week because that's all he could afford. He took the envelope from Emma, noted the official seal, the return address from some law firm in Denver he'd never heard of. Morrison and Associates, estate planning and probate. His stomach twisted. What now? Tyler shuffled out of the bedroom he shared with his little sister Sophie, rubbing sleep from his 9-year-old eyes. His superhero pajamas were 2 sizes too small, the sleeves riding up his skinny arms. "Are we going to be late again?" he asked. Rocky glanced at the clock. They were already late. He shoved the envelope into his jacket pocket. "Later," he muttered. "Come on, guys. Grab your stuff." The drive to drop the kids at school was silent, except for Sophie's soft humming in the back seat. She was 6, still young enough to find music in everything, even the rattle of their dying Honda's engine. Rocky watched her in the rearview mirror, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, her mother's eyes staring out the window at the grey Denver morning. She looked so much like Sarah it hurt. After dropping them off, Rocky sat in the warehouse parking lot for 10 minutes before his shift started. He couldn't put it off any longer. He tore open the envelope, hands shaking slightly, not from cold but from something deeper, the constant low-level fear that had become his baseline since becoming a widower. Inside was a single typed letter on expensive paper. "Dear Mr. Rocky Dalton," it began. "We are writing to inform you of the passing of your great-uncle, Marcus Dalton, who died on September 3rd of this year. As his sole surviving heir, you have been named beneficiary of his estate, including all property, assets, and belongings. The primary asset is Hollow Ridge Estate, a 200-acre property with main residence located in Clear Creek County, Colorado. We request your presence at our Denver office at your earliest convenience to finalize transfer of the deed and discuss estate details. Please contact us to schedule an appointment." Rocky read it 3 times. Great Uncle Marcus. He'd heard the name maybe twice in his entire life, always in passing, always with a strange tone. His father's uncle, the one who disappeared, the one nobody talked about. Rocky had assumed the man was dead for years. Apparently, he had been right. An estate. Property. 200 acres. It sounded like a mistake. People like Rocky didn't inherit estates. They inherited debt and disappointment. But still, something stirred in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. That evening, after another 10-hour shift loading trucks until his back screamed, Rocky drove to the address on the letter. The law office was in a nice part of downtown, the kind of building with marble floors and receptionists who looked at him like he'd tracked mud across their clean world. Maybe he had. His work boots were caked with warehouse grime, his jacket frayed at the cuffs. A young associate led him to a conference room where an older man in an expensive suit waited. "Mr. Dalton," the lawyer said, extending a hand. "I'm Douglas Morrison. Thank you for coming." They sat. Morrison slid a folder across the polished table. "I'll be direct. Your great-uncle Marcus was an interesting man. Very private. He owned Hollow Ridge Estate for over 40 years, but lived there alone. No visitors, no staff. He maintained everything himself." Rocky opened the folder. Inside were photographs of a massive stone mansion nestled in a mountain valley. It looked like something from another era, all towering chimneys and mullioned windows and wraparound porches. The kind of place Rocky had only ever seen in movies. "It's been unoccupied for the past 15 years, Morrison continued. "Marcus moved to a care facility in 2009 and passed away last month. He left explicit instructions that the property go to you and only you." "Why me?" Rocky asked. "I barely knew him." Morrison hesitated. "Frankly, I don't know. Your uncle was very particular about his wishes but not forthcoming about his reasons. What I can tell you is that the estate is legally yours. The deed is clear. There are no outstanding liens or mortgages. It's fully paid." Rocky stared at the photographs. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "There's one thing you should know," Morrison added, his voice dropping slightly. "Several parties have expressed interest in purchasing the property over the years. Quite aggressively, in fact. Your uncle refused all offers. And," his pause was weighted, "there have been some difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" "People trying to claim the property through various legal channels, trespassing incidents. Your uncle was very concerned about security in his final years. He installed extensive systems, kept detailed records. He seemed to believe someone was after something he had." Rocky's hands tightened on the folder. "After what?" Morrison shook his head. "He never said. But Mr. Dalton, I'll be candid. If you choose to take possession, you should be careful. There's something about that property that attracts the wrong kind of attention." Rocky thought about his apartment, about the eviction notice he'd received last week, about Emma's shoes with holes in the soles and Tyler's teacher asking if everything was okay at home because the boy kept falling asleep in class. He thought about Sophie asking when they could have birthday cake again, not understanding that birthday cakes cost money they didn't have. "When can I see it?" Rocky asked. The drive took 3 hours, winding through foothills that gradually became mountains, civilization falling away until there was nothing but pine forest and granite peaks. Rocky brought the kids. He'd picked them up from school early, telling them they were going on an adventure. Emma sat in front, studying the directions on his phone. Tyler and Sophie played some elaborate imaginary game in the back, their voices a familiar comfort. The turnoff was easy to miss, just a narrow road marked by a weathered wooden sign, Hollow Ridge, private property. The road climbed steeply, switchbacking through dense forest. And then, suddenly, the trees opened up. "Whoa," Tyler breathed. The valley spread before them like a hidden world. Steep mountains rose on 3 sides, creating a natural amphitheater of stone and evergreen. A creek ran through the center, silver in the afternoon light. And dominating the valley floor, set back against a cliff face, was the mansion. It was bigger than the photographs suggested. 3 stories of grey stone and dark timber, with multiple wings spreading out like arms embracing the land. Stone chimneys rose from a steep slate roof, wide porches wrapped around the structure, supported by massive beams. It should have looked abandoned, should have shown 15 years of neglect. But it didn't. The lawn was trim. The windows gleamed. The stone walkways were clear of debris. It looked like someone could walk out the front door at any moment. Rocky pulled up the long gravel drive, his heart pounding. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be his. The kids tumbled out, already running toward the porch. Emma stopped, turned back. "Dad, do we really own this?" Rocky held up the keys Morrison had given him. The heavy brass felt substantial in his palm. "I guess we do, baby." The front door was solid oak, easily 8 feet tall, with an iron handle worn smooth by decades of use. Rocky slipped the key into the lock. It turned easily, too easily for a door supposedly unopened for 15 years. The mechanism clicked. He pushed. The door swung open on silent hinges. The entrance hall took Rocky's breath away. Vaulted ceilings stretched 20 feet overhead, supported by dark wooden beams. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate patterns. The floor was polished stone, and afternoon light poured through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the space. But what struck Rocky most was the cleanliness. No dust, no cobwebs, no signs of abandonment. Sophie tugged his hand. "Daddy, it smells nice. Like lemons." She was right. The air smelled fresh, almost antiseptic, like someone had just cleaned. Emma walked to a side table where a vase sat empty but spotless. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she'd noticed something wrong. "If nobody's been here for 15 years, why isn't there dust?" Rocky didn't have an answer. They explored slowly, room by room. A massive living room with stone fireplace large enough to stand in. A dining room with a table that could seat 20. A kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. All marble counters and professional appliances. Every surface gleamed, every window sparkled. Tyler ran up the stairs, his footsteps echoing. Rocky followed, Emma and Sophie behind. The second floor held bedroom after bedroom, each one furnished, each one pristine. At the end of the hall, double doors opened into what must have been Marcus's master suite. It was huge, with its own fireplace, a sitting area, and windows overlooking the valley. On the dresser sat a single photograph in a silver frame. Rocky picked it up. The photo showed a young man in military uniform, probably from the 1960s or 70s. He had Rocky's jaw, the same sharp eyes. This must be Marcus, young and strong, before whatever happened that made him hide away in this valley. Beside the photo was an envelope. Rocky's name was written across it in careful script. His hands trembled as he opened it. "Rocky," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've decided to come. I wasn't sure you would. We never met, but I've kept track of your life. I know about Sarah. I'm sorry for your loss. I know about your struggles, about working yourself to exhaustion to provide for your children. I know because I've been watching, not because I'm cruel, but because I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" Rocky wondered. "This property is yours now," the letter continued. "Everything on it, everything in it, belongs to you and your children. But Rocky, you need to understand something. This isn't just a house, it's a fortress. It's been maintained remotely through systems I installed years ago. Automated cleaning, security, maintenance. Nobody has set foot inside for 15 years, but the house has never been abandoned." Rocky looked up, scanning the room. Security cameras. That's why everything was perfect. The letter went on. "There are people who want what I've hidden here. Powerful people, dangerous people. They've tried legal channels, intimidation, even break-ins. But they've never found it because they don't know where to look. You need to be careful. Trust no one who comes asking about the valley or the estate. Accept no offers, no matter how generous. And Rocky, whatever you do, don't tell anyone what you find." "What I find," Rocky read on, his pulse quickening. "The real inheritance isn't the house, it's below. When you're ready, when you understand why it must stay hidden, you'll find the way down. The answer is in your greatest loss and your greatest blessing. Protect them, Rocky. Protect them the way I couldn't protect what I loved." The letter was signed simply, Marcus. Emma appeared in the doorway. "Dad, you okay?" Rocky folded the letter quickly. "Yeah, baby. Just reading something Uncle Marcus left." That night, they stayed. There was no way Rocky was driving 3 hours back to Denver in the dark. And besides, the kids were already claiming bedrooms, their laughter echoing through halls that had been silent for too long. They found the pantry stocked with canned goods, the freezer full. Rocky made pasta with jarred sauce, and they ate in the huge dining room, 4 people at a table built for 20, but somehow it didn't feel empty. It felt like possibility. After the kids were asleep, Rocky walked the house. He checked doors, windows, tested locks. Everything was secure. Too secure. Morrison had mentioned extensive security systems, and now Rocky found them everywhere. Cameras in corners, motion sensors, reinforced locks on every access point. This wasn't just a home, it was a bunker. He ended up in the basement, following stone steps down into cool darkness. He found the light switch. Fluorescent tubes flickered to life, revealing a sprawling space divided into rooms. Wine cellar, storage, workshop. Mechanical room with the humming machinery that must control the automated systems Marcus mentioned. Rocky walked slowly, examining everything. His footsteps echoed strangely, sometimes sounding hollow, sometimes solid. In the workshop, he found tools arranged with military precision. In the storage room, boxes labeled with dates going back to the 1970s. And then he found the wall. It was in the far corner of the wine cellar, partially hidden behind empty racks. At first glance, it looked like any other wall, rough stone mortared together. But when Rocky leaned against it, catching his breath, he heard something, a hollow echo, different from the rest. He knocked, definitely hollow. Rocky ran his hand along the stones, looking for seams, triggers, anything. There had to be a way through. Marcus's letter said the real inheritance was below. Below this? "What are you hiding, Uncle Marcus?" Rocky whispered. A sound from upstairs made him freeze. Footsteps. Someone was in the house. Rocky's heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed a wrench from the workshop and moved silently toward the stairs. The footsteps were on the first floor, moving through rooms with purpose. Not the random wandering of his kids, someone else. He climbed the stairs slowly, weapon raised. At the top, he peered around the corner. A figure stood in the entrance hall, backlit by moonlight through the windows. Tall, lean, definitely not one of his children. Rocky stepped into the hall. "Don't move." The figure turned, hands up. "Easy," a woman's voice said. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." Rocky found the light switch. The chandelier blazed to life, revealing a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing expensive outdoor gear. She looked calm, too calm for someone caught breaking in. "Who are you?" Rocky demanded. "My name is Diane," she said evenly. "I'm from Mountain Property Services. We've been maintaining this estate remotely for the past 15 years, per the terms of Marcus Dalton's trust." Rocky didn't lower the wrench. "At 3 a.m. Diane smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I saw lights. I wanted to make sure everything was in order. Marcus was very particular about security. The front door was locked." "How did you get in?" "I have keys. I've been the property manager since 2009. Morrison didn't mention a property manager." Something flickered across Diane's face. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation. Well, perhaps there was some confusion in the paperwork. "The important thing is, I'm here to help. This is a large property. You'll need someone who knows the systems." Rocky studied her. She stood too comfortably in the entrance hall, like she owned the place. Her eyes kept flicking toward the hallway that led to the basement stairs. "I think I can figure it out," Rocky said. "But thanks." Diane's smile hardened. "Mr. Dalton, you should know that several parties have expressed serious interest in purchasing this property. I could facilitate a sale that would set you up very comfortably. Much easier than trying to maintain this place on your own. It's not for sale." "Not yet," Diane said. "But you might reconsider once you understand what you're dealing with. This property requires constant upkeep, specialized knowledge, and then there are the security concerns." "What security concerns?" Diane shrugged. "Remote location, valuable property. There have been incidents over the years, attempted break-ins, vandalism. Marcus took those threats very seriously, perhaps too seriously." Rocky's grip tightened on the wrench. "I think you should leave." For a long moment, Diane didn't move. Then she nodded slowly. "Of course. But Mr. Dalton, a word of advice. Be very careful what you go looking for in this house. Some things are better left undiscovered. She walked past him toward the door. Rocky followed, watching as she stepped out into the night. A black SUV waited at the end of the driveway, engine running. Diane climbed in and it pulled away, red taillights disappearing into the darkness. Rocky locked the door, then checked every other door and window. His hands were shaking. "Dad?" Emma stood at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, her voice small. "Who was that?" "Nobody, baby. Just someone who used to work here. Go back to bed." But Emma didn't move. Her next words chilled him. "Dad, I heard what she said. What are we supposed to find?" Rocky climbed the stairs, put his hands on his daughter's shoulders. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, we're going to figure it out together. Okay?" Emma nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. Or maybe excitement. With her, it was hard to tell. The next morning, Rocky searched the house more thoroughly. In Marcus's study, he found files, hundreds of them, organized in filing cabinets that lined one wall. Rocky pulled one at random. Inside were newspaper clippings from 1994, articles about a Treasury Department investigation into missing funds. Several articles were highlighted, particularly those mentioning Marcus Dalton as lead investigator. Rocky pulled another file. This one contained photocopies of financial documents, bank transfers, account numbers. A pattern emerged. Money moving through shell corporations, offshore accounts, then disappearing. Marcus's notes filled the margins: trace to source, connect to Project Safeguard, recovered assets total. Rocky sat back. His great-uncle hadn't been some eccentric recluse. He'd been a federal investigator tracking financial crimes. He found Marcus's journal in the bottom drawer, locked, but the key was taped underneath. The entries spanned decades. Rocky flipped to the final pages, dated 15 years ago. March 12th, 2009. They know I have it. Phillips called again, more aggressive this time. He's threatening legal action, but we both know he can't risk official channels. If this goes public, half of Washington falls. March 19th, 2009. Moved everything to the vault. New security protocols active. If they come, they'll find nothing. March 26th, 2009. I'm done running. Moving to the care facility tomorrow. The house will maintain itself. When the right person finds it, they'll understand. It has to be someone who knows what it means to lose everything, someone who'll fight to protect their family, someone like Rocky. Rocky's breath caught. Marcus had planned this. All of it. The final entry was dated April 2nd, 2009. To whoever finds this, the code is simple. What you lost, what remains. They are the key to everything. Trust them. Trust yourself. And trust that some fights are worth having, even when the odds are impossible, especially then. Rocky closed the journal, mind racing. What you lost, what remains. Sarah, the kids. It had to be. Tyler burst into the study, Sophie right behind. "Dad, we found something." They led him to the basement, to the wine cellar. Sophie pointed at the floor. "Look, Daddy, it's like a puzzle." Rocky knelt. The stone floor had markings he'd missed in the dim light last night. Not random, but deliberate, a pattern of symbols carved into the rock. Tyler traced them with his finger. "They're numbers," he said. "See? But weird numbers." "Roman numerals," Emma said, appearing with her phone. She'd been researching upstairs. "I looked it up. These are dates." Rocky studied them closer. She was right. VXV Mimixii, 8/15, 2013, Emma's birthday. Then IXI MEMXVI, 3/22, 2016, Tyler's birthday. And GX MEMXVE, November 9th, 2018, Sophie's birthday. What you lost, what remains. Sarah died. The kids remained. Rocky's hands trembled as he pressed the stones in sequence. Nothing happened. He tried again, in different order. Still nothing. "Wait," Emma said. "Maybe it's not just pushing them. Maybe we need to turn them. Rocky tried twisting the first stone. It rotated slightly, clicking into place. He did the same with the others, following the birth dates in chronological order. The final stone clicked, and somewhere deep in the walls, machinery engaged. The hollow wall he'd discovered last night groaned. Stone scraped against stone. A section of wall, 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, slid inward, then sideways, revealing a steel door behind. The kids gasped. Rocky stood slowly, heart pounding. The door was massive, the kind you'd see in a bank vault. It had an electronic keypad and a biometric scanner. A piece of paper was taped to it, protected in plastic. Marcus's handwriting again. The code is in what you lost. The key is in what remains. The code, numbers. Rocky tried Sarah's birthday, the day she died, their anniversary. Nothing worked. He tried combinations of the kids' birthdays. Nothing. Emma stepped forward. "Dad, can I try?" Rocky moved aside. Emma placed her small hand on the biometric scanner. It glowed blue, scanning her palm, then Tyler's palm, then Sophie's. The vault began unlocking. Heavy bolts slid back with deep metallic thuds. The wheel in the center of the door began to turn on its own. Rocky pulled the kids back. "Stand behind me." The door swung open, releasing a breath of cool, dry air. Beyond was darkness. Rocky fumbled for his phone's flashlight, clicked it on. A staircase led down into blackness, much deeper than the basement. The steps were steel, the walls concrete. This wasn't part of the original house. This had been built later, built specifically to hide something. Rocky descended first, the kids close behind. The staircase went down 1 story, then 2, then 3. Finally, it opened into a vast underground chamber. Rocky swept his flashlight around, and his breath stopped. The room was enormous, easily 50 feet long and 30 feet wide. The walls were lined with safety deposit boxes, hundreds of them, built into the concrete like a bank vault. In the center of the room sat a large steel table, and on that table was a leather-bound ledger. Rocky approached slowly, as if the whole scene might vanish if he moved too fast. He opened the ledger. His flashlight illuminated neat columns of Marcus's handwriting. Inventory lists, bearer bonds, gold certificates, rare coins, artwork, documentation. Each item had a value next to it. Rocky's eyes ran down the columns, the numbers growing larger and larger. At the bottom of the final page, Marcus had written in red ink, "Total recovered assets, value as of March 2009, $285,412,000. Rocky's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the concrete floor. $285 million. "Dad," Emma's voice seemed to come from far away. "Dad, what is this?" Rocky couldn't speak, couldn't process it. $285 million hidden under a house nobody wanted, protected by a man nobody remembered. Tyler had found another note on the table. He handed it to Rocky. This time Marcus's handwriting was shakier, written more recently. To Rocky it began. "If you've made it this far, then you understand. This money was stolen from the American people by officials who swore to protect them. I spent 5 years tracking it down, recovering it piece by piece, but I couldn't return it through official channels. The people who stole it were too powerful. Judges, senators, department heads. They would have buried this evidence and me with it. So I did the only thing I could. I hid it, kept it safe. Waited for someone who would understand what it means to fight for what's right, even when the system is rigged against you. Someone who knows what it's like to struggle, someone who would use this not for themselves but for others. You're not rich, Rocky. You're not powerful. But you're honest. You work yourself to exhaustion for your children. You do the right thing even when it costs you. That's why I chose you. That's why everything I have is now yours. But Rocky, understand this. Powerful people have been looking for this money for 15 years. They know it's somewhere in this valley. Now that you've opened the vault, they'll know someone has found it. They'll come. They'll threaten. They'll offer you money, safety, anything to get you to walk away. Don't. This money belongs to the people. It needs to be returned, but carefully, legally, safely. You'll need help, real help, not from anyone official. Trust the journal, trust the files in my study. And most of all, trust yourself. Protect your children, protect this legacy, and Rocky, use it wisely. Change lives, make it mean something, make my last act of defiance worth the cost. The note was signed Marcus Dalton, dated March 29, 2009. Rocky looked up at his children. Emma stared at the safety deposit boxes, her young face trying to comprehend. Tyler stood with his mouth open, eyes wide. Sophie, not fully understanding but sensing the weight of the moment, held her brother's hand tightly. "We're rich?" Tyler finally asked. Rocky thought about Marcus's note, about stolen money, corrupt officials, 15 years of hiding, about Diane showing up in the middle of the night, about the cameras, the security, the threats Marcus documented in his journal. "No," Rocky said quietly, "we're not rich, we're responsible." Emma met his eyes. She understood. She always did. "What do we do, Dad?" Rocky stood, pulled his kids close. "We figure this out, together. But first, we need to understand what we're protecting and who we're protecting it from." They climbed back up the stairs, the vault door closing behind them with a heavy finality. Rocky knew their lives had just changed forever. The question was whether it had changed for better or worse. Outside, dawn was breaking over the mountain valley, painting the peaks in shades of gold and rose. It should have been beautiful, but Rocky couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That somewhere out there Diane was making phone calls, that powerful people were already planning their next move. He thought about Marcus's warning, "Protect your children, protect this legacy." Rocky looked down at Emma, Tyler, and Sophie, still in their pajamas, standing in the doorway of a mansion they now owned, above a fortune they now guarded. What happens next will test this family in ways Rocky never imagined, challenge everything he believes about right and wrong, and force him to choose between safety and justice, between hiding and fighting, between walking away and standing his ground. But right now, in this moment, Rocky made himself a promise. Whatever came, whoever tried to take this from them, he would protect his children. He would honor Marcus's trust, and he would do the right thing even if it cost him everything. Because some legacies are worth fighting for. Some secrets are worth protecting. And some single fathers, pushed to the edge, discover they're stronger than they ever knew. The first week at Hollow Ridge Estate passed in a strange blur of discovery and dread. Rocky moved the family in permanently because there was no point paying rent on an apartment they'd never returned to. Besides, the mansion was safer than any place they'd ever lived. Or so he thought, until he started finding the listening devices. It was Emma who discovered the first one, tucked behind a painting in the living room. She'd been dusting, trying to make herself useful, when she noticed a tiny red light blinking in the frame's shadow. "Dad!" she called out, her voice tight with fear. "What's this?" Rocky examined it, his stomach dropping. A wireless transmitter, small, professional grade, still active. Someone had been listening to everything they said since they arrived. He checked his watch, calculated how many conversations they'd had about the vault, about the money, about Marcus's letter. Too many. "Don't say anything," he whispered to Emma. "Help me search the house." They found 6 more devices over the next 2 hours. One in the kitchen, hidden inside a light fixture. One in the master bedroom behind the headboard. One in the study where Marcus's files were kept. Whoever planted them had access to the entire house and had been listening for days, maybe longer. Rocky gathered the devices in the workshop, his hands shaking with anger and fear. Then he started a more thorough sweep, using techniques he'd learned from YouTube videos on his phone. The paranoia that had seemed crazy when he first read Marcus's warnings now felt absolutely justified. By evening, he'd found 3 more devices and 2 hidden cameras, one pointed at the basement door, another at the entrance to Marcus's study. Someone wasn't just listening. They were watching, waiting to see if Rocky would find what Marcus had hidden. That night, after the kids were asleep, Rocky sat in the study with all the lights off, staring at the devices he'd collected. 9 in total. 9 violations of their privacy. 9 reasons to pack up and leave. To walk away from this whole nightmare and go back to being poor, but safe. Except they couldn't go back. Not really. Now that Rocky knew what was hidden below, now that powerful people knew he'd found it, leaving wouldn't make them safe. It would just make them easier targets. He opened Marcus's journal again, reading by flashlight, looking for answers his great-uncle might have left. The entries from the mid-90s painted a disturbing picture. Marcus hadn't just been investigating financial crimes. He'd uncovered a systematic theft operation run by senior government officials, people whose names Rocky recognized from news coverage, from history books. June 14, 1995, one entry read, "Confirmed Phillips has been diverting recovered assets for 3 years. Estimated total theft exceeds $400 million. But he's not working alone. Traced payments to offshore accounts controlled by Senator Morrison, Judge Catherine Wells, and Treasury Secretary Brennan. They've built an entire shadow network." Rocky's blood ran cold. Senator Morrison. The same Morrison whose law firm had contacted him about the inheritance? It couldn't be a coincidence. He kept reading. Marcus's entries grew more paranoid as the years passed, documenting threats, break-in attempts, cars following him. By 2008, Marcus was convinced he'd be killed if he didn't disappear. February 3, 2008. They found my apartment, files ransacked, computer stolen. But joke's on them. Everything that matters is already at Hollow Ridge, buried where they'll never think to look. The house is my fortress now. Automated systems mean I can leave, but nothing changes. Let them watch an empty building for the next 20 years. Marcus had been smarter than his pursuers realized. He'd walked away, gone into assisted living under an assumed name, and let Hollow Ridge sit empty but protected. And all the while he'd been watching, waiting for the right heir. Rocky closed the journal and pulled up Marcus's files on the computer. Another risk he knew he was taking, but he needed information more than he needed perfect security. The files were encrypted, but Marcus had left the password in his letter, Emma's birthday backwards, 13/15/08. The files opened, revealing terabytes of data, bank records, wire transfers, audio recordings, photographs of documents. Marcus had built an entire case, evidence that would bring down dozens of powerful people if it ever went public. Rocky's hands hovered over the keyboard. This was bigger than he'd imagined. $285 million in recovered assets was just part of it. Marcus had the proof to expose decades of corruption at the highest levels of government. No wonder people wanted Rocky gone. A noise outside made him freeze. Footsteps on gravel. Rocky killed the computer screen and moved to the window. 3 figures approached the house, flashlights sweeping the grounds. They weren't trying to be subtle. Rocky's heart hammered. He grabbed his phone, pulled up the security camera app he'd installed that afternoon. The cameras showed the figures clearly now. 2 men and a woman, all wearing dark clothing, moving with purpose toward the basement windows. Rocky dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. "I need police at Hollow Ridge Estate, Clear Creek County," he said quietly. 3 people trying to break in. "Sir, stay on the line. Units are on the way. Are you in a safe location?" "Upstairs with my kids? But these people, they're not random. They're after something specific." The dispatcher kept him talking while Rocky watched the cameras. The intruders were testing windows, looking for access. One of them pulled out what looked like a crowbar. They were going to force their way in. Rocky had installed new locks, reinforced the basement windows with steel bars, but he didn't know how long those would hold. He crept down the hall to where the kids slept. Emma was already awake, standing in her doorway. "Dad, get Tyler and Sophie. Bring them to the master bedroom. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Emma's face went pale, but she nodded. Rocky watched her disappear into the kids' room, then turned back to the stairs. The police were coming, but the nearest station was 30 minutes away. He was on his own until then. Downstairs, glass shattered. They were inside. Rocky grabbed the pistol he'd bought 3 days ago, his hands slick with sweat. He'd never fired a gun in his life, barely knew how to hold it properly, but the gun store owner had shown him the basics. Point and pull, simple. He descended the stairs slowly, phone in one hand, gun in the other. The dispatcher was still talking, telling him to stay upstairs, to wait for officers, but Rocky couldn't just hide. If these people got to the vault, if they got to the evidence Marcus had collected, everything would be lost. He reached the basement door. It was open, light spilling up from below. Voices echoed in the stairwell, urgent and frustrated. "Where is it?" a man's voice demanded. "Phillips said it was down here." "There's nothing but wine and storage," another voice answered. Maybe the old man was lying. "Or maybe someone already found it," the first voice said. "That guy who inherited, he's been here for days." Rocky's jaw clenched. They were talking about him, about the vault he'd opened less than 24 hours ago. "We need to find him," the second voice said. "Make him tell us where it is." Rocky raised the gun, his hands shaking so badly he could barely aim. "I already called the police," he shouted down the stairs. "They're on the way. Get out of my house." Silence, then footsteps, fast, coming up the stairs. Rocky backed away, weapon raised. "Stay back, I'm armed." The first figure emerged from the darkness, a tall man in a black jacket. He saw Rocky, saw the gun, and stopped. Behind him, 2 others appeared. "Easy," the man said, hands up. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want what Marcus stole." "He didn't steal anything," Rocky said. "He recovered what you stole." The man's eyes narrowed. "You found it. You opened the vault." Rocky's finger tightened on the trigger. "Get out!" "Mr. Dalton, listen to me," the man said, his voice calm but edged with threat. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. That money, those files, they're evidence in an ongoing investigation. You're obstructing justice by keeping them. You're not police," Rocky said. "No," the man admitted. "But we work for people who can make your life very difficult, or very easy. Your choice." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The man heard them too. His expression hardened. "This isn't over," he said. "You can't protect what you don't understand." The 3 intruders turned and ran, disappearing back down the basement stairs. Rocky heard glass breaking again, then silence. By the time he reached the basement, they were gone, escaped through a window they'd forced open. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived 15 minutes later. Rocky showed them the broken windows, the signs of forced entry. He didn't mention the vault or the money or the real reason people kept trying to break in. He just said he'd inherited the property and someone clearly didn't want him here. The deputies took notes, promised to increase patrols in the area, but Rocky could see the skepticism in their eyes. Hollow Ridge had a reputation. Weird things happened here. People got paranoid. Maybe this new owner was just jumpy. After they left, Rocky checked on the kids. They were huddled together in the master bedroom, Emma holding her siblings close. Sophie was crying softly. Tyler's face was pale and tight with fear. Rocky sat on the bed, pulled them all into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Are those bad people going to come back?" Sophie asked, her voice muffled against Rocky's shoulder. "Not tonight," Rocky said, "but we need to be ready if they do." Emma pulled back, meeting her father's eyes. "Dad, maybe we should leave. Go somewhere they can't find us." Rocky wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed at him to pack up, take the kids, disappear. But Marcus's words echoed in his mind. Protect this legacy. Use it wisely. Make it mean something. If we leave, Rocky said slowly, then everything Uncle Marcus did was for nothing. All that money, all that evidence, it'll disappear. The people who stole it will get away with it. And somewhere there are families who need help, who deserve justice, who are counting on someone to do the right thing. Tyler wiped his nose. But Dad, you always said family comes first. And you do, Rocky said firmly. You always will. But sometimes doing right by your family means doing right by others too. Your mum understood that. She always helped people even when we barely had enough ourselves. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She'd been old enough to remember Sarah, to remember her mother's kindness. What would Mum do? Rocky smiled sadly. She'd tell me to stop being scared and start being smart, to find people we can trust, to build something good from this mess. Over the next 3 days, Rocky barely slept. He upgraded every security system in the house, installed motion detectors around the property, and set up cameras that fed directly to his phone. He moved the most sensitive documents from Marcus's study to the vault, 3 stories underground where no one could reach them without blasting through concrete. And he started researching the names from Marcus's files. Senator Morrison had died in 2016, but his son Douglas ran the law firm that contacted Rocky. Judge Catherine Wells was retired, but still influential. Treasury Secretary Brennan had left government and now worked for a private equity firm. They were all still out there, still powerful, still vulnerable if Marcus's evidence ever went public. Rocky needed help, real help, someone who understood what Marcus had uncovered and how to fight people this powerful. He found that help in the most unexpected place. Buried in Marcus's files was a contact list, coded names and phone numbers. One entry stood out: Eagle, retired federal agent, asset recovery specialist. A phone number with a Denver area code. Rocky stared at the number for an hour before calling. It rang 4 times. "This is Walter," a gravelly voice answered. Rocky took a breath. "My name is Rocky Dalton. I inherited Hollow Ridge Estate from Marcus Dalton." Silence. Then, very quietly, "Did you find it?" "Yes." More silence. Then, "We need to meet, not at your place. Somewhere public." "Do you know Red Rocks?" "The amphitheater. There's a hiking trail 2 miles up from the lower lot. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Come alone." Walter hung up before Rocky could respond. The next morning, Rocky left the kids with a neighbor he'd met, an older woman named Janet, who lived 10 miles down the mountain and seemed kind. He drove to Red Rocks, parked, and hiked up the trail as directed. Walter was waiting at a scenic overlook, a man in his late 60s with military bearing and eyes that had seen too much. He studied Rocky as he approached. "You look like him," Walter said. "Marcus. Same jaw. Same way of standing like the world's on your shoulders. You knew him well as anyone did." Walter gestured to a bench. "Sit. We don't have much time." They sat. Rocky waited. "Marcus was the best investigator I ever worked with," Walter began. "When I was with Treasury's Office of Enforcement, he was the guy we called for impossible cases. He could follow money through 100 shell companies, find assets hidden in ways I couldn't imagine. But he was honest. Too honest. What does that mean? It means when he discovered our bosses were thieves, he couldn't just look away." Walter's jaw tightened. "In '94, we recovered a massive haul from a drug cartel. 400 million in assets. Cash, bonds, artwork, all of it. Marcus was in charge of cataloging and securing it. But when it came time to turn everything over to the Justice Department, the numbers didn't match. Someone had skimmed. A lot." Rocky leaned forward. "Who?" "Everyone," Walter said bitterly. "The people at the top. They'd been doing it for years, taking a cut of every major recovery, funneling it to offshore accounts. Marcus started investigating, quietly. What he found was bigger than any of us imagined. Senators, judges, cabinet members, all part of one network, all stealing from recovered assets. What happened next will turn this story upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus built a case, Walter continued, spent a year documenting everything, but when he tried to take it up the chain, they shut him down, threatened him, made it clear if he went public, he'd disappear. So he did something crazy. He stole the evidence, and $285 million in assets that were about to be diverted. Rocky's eyes widened. He stole it to protect it. Exactly. Walter nodded. He couldn't trust the system, so he became the system. Hid everything at Hollow Ridge, set up automated defenses, and waited. A few of us knew what he'd done. We tried to help, but they were watching us too. Eventually, Marcus went underground completely. I didn't hear from him for years. Until now, Rocky said quietly. Walter looked at him sharply. You opened the vault. I did. And you found the files. The evidence. All of it. Walter exhaled slowly. Then they know. Everyone Marcus was protecting that money from, they know someone finally got inside. You're in serious danger, Rocky. I figured that out when people started breaking into my house. It's going to get worse, Walter warned. These people, they're old now, some of them dead, but their children, their associates, they're still powerful. They've spent 15 years trying to find what Marcus hid. Now they know it's not lost. They'll come after you with everything they have. Lawyers, intimidation, worse. Rocky's hands clenched. What am I supposed to do? I've got 3 kids. I can't just fight the entire government. Walter smiled grimly. You won't have to. There are others like me. People Marcus trusted. People who've been waiting for this day. If you're willing to fight, we'll help you. But you need to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't going away. Not ever. The moment you decide to protect what Marcus hid, you become what he was, a target. Rocky thought about Emma, Tyler, and Sophie, about the apartment they'd left behind, the life of quiet desperation that had seemed so terrible but now felt safe by comparison. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see him now. And he thought about the $285 million sitting in a vault under his house, money that had been stolen from people who needed it, money that could change lives if used right. Tell me what I need to do, Rocky said. Over the next week, Walter introduced Rocky to a small network of former federal agents who had worked with Marcus. There was Patricia, a forensic accountant who'd helped trace the stolen funds. James, a lawyer who specialized in asset recovery cases, and Michael, a former FBI agent who now worked in private security. They met in secret in different locations each time, never at Hollow Ridge. They reviewed Marcus's evidence, validated the documentation, and began building a legal strategy. The goal wasn't to expose the conspiracy all at once. It was to secure Rocky's ownership of the estate and the assets, then establish a legal foundation to distribute the money properly. But first, they had to survive the pressure campaign. It started with legal challenges. Diane, the woman who'd broken into the house that first night, filed a claim against the estate. She alleged Marcus had promised her ownership of Hollow Ridge in exchange for years of maintenance work. Her lawsuit claimed Rocky's inheritance was invalid. Then came the property offers. 5 different buyers contacted Rocky in 3 days, each offering more than the last. $2 million, $5 million, $10 million for the estate, no questions asked, immediate cash. Rocky refused them all. The threats escalated. Someone slashed the tires on his truck. A brick came through the mansion's front window with a note tied to it. Sell and walk away while you still can. The sheriff's department investigated, but found nothing. Rocky moved the kids to Janet's house for their safety, visiting them every evening but sleeping at Hollow Ridge alone, armed and afraid. He couldn't drag his children deeper into this fight. Emma cried when he left them the first night. "You promised we'd be together," she sobbed. "We will be. Rocky said, holding her tight. But right now, the safest place for you is away from me, just for a little while. But what if something happens to you? What if you don't come back? Rocky had no answer for that. He just held his daughter until her tears stopped. Back at the mansion, Rocky continued reviewing Marcus's files. The evidence was overwhelming. Wire transfers with signatures, audio recordings of conversations about asset diversions, photographs of documents that should have been sealed. Marcus had built a case that could bring down dozens of people. But there was one file Rocky kept returning to. It was labeled simply Project Safeguard, and it contained something unexpected. Plans. Not just evidence of crimes, but a blueprint for a foundation that would use recovered assets to help struggling families. Marcus had designed the entire thing, from legal structure to distribution priorities. Rocky read through the plans late into the night, tears streaming down his face. Marcus hadn't just hidden the money. He'd built a roadmap for using it right, for turning stolen assets into support for single parents, education funds for kids, housing assistance for families barely hanging on. Marcus had designed a legacy, and he'd chosen Rocky to build it. The next morning, Rocky met with James, the lawyer. "I want to move forward," Rocky said. "I want to establish the foundation Marcus planned, use the money the way he intended." James nodded slowly. "It's possible, but it's going to take time. We need to secure your legal ownership first. Diane's lawsuit is just the beginning. They'll throw everything at you to delay, to exhaust your resources, to make you give up." "How long?" "Could be years," James admitted. "But if you're committed, if you're willing to fight, we can win this." Rocky thought about his kids at Janet's house, about the life he'd wanted for them, safe and normal. Then he thought about all the other families struggling the way he had struggled. All the single parents working themselves to death, all the kids going hungry, all the people who needed someone to fight for them. "I'm committed," Rocky said. That evening, Rocky returned to Janet's house to see his kids. They were playing in her backyard when he arrived, their laughter carrying on the mountain air. For a moment, Rocky just watched them, memorizing their joy. Emma saw him first. "Dad!" She ran over, Tyler and Sophie right behind. "Are we going home?" "Soon," Rocky promised. "I'm working on making sure it's safe first." They had dinner with Janet, who insisted Rocky looked too thin, needed feeding. She piled his plate with pot roast and potatoes, and for an hour, Rocky let himself pretend everything was normal. After dinner, he sat with the kids on Janet's porch. The sun was setting, painting the mountains purple and gold. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, "are we going to be okay?" Rocky pulled his son close. "Yeah, buddy, we're going to be okay. How do you know? Because we're together. Because we're fighting for something that matters, and because I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Ever." Sophie climbed into his lap. "I miss our house. The big house." "Me too, baby." Emma sat beside him, mature beyond her 12 years. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about doing the right thing." Her voice dropped. "I'm scared, but I'm also proud of you. Mom would be proud too." Rocky's throat tightened. He kissed the top of Emma's head, unable to speak. That night, driving back to Hollow Ridge, Rocky's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Dalton?" a smooth voice said. "My name is Gregory Phillips. I believe we need to talk." Rocky's hands tightened on the wheel. Phillips. The name from Marcus's journal. The man who'd led the theft operation. "I don't think we do," Rocky said. "Please don't hang up." Phillips sounded almost friendly. "I understand you've come into possession of certain property that once belonged to Marcus Dalton. I'm prepared to make you an offer that will solve all your problems. It's not for sale. Mr. Dalton, you have 3 children to consider, a legal battle ahead that will drain whatever resources you have. I'm offering you $20 million cash for the estate and its contents. You could move anywhere, start fresh, Give your kids a real future. They already have a future, Rocky said, and it doesn't include selling out to the people who stole from the American public. Silence. Then Phillips's voice turned cold. You're making a mistake, a very serious mistake. Marcus made the same error. He thought he could fight us, and look where it got him. Isolated, paranoid, dying alone in a care facility. He died knowing he'd done the right thing, Rocky said. That's more than you'll ever have. We'll see, Phillips said. When your children are crying because they're afraid, when you're drowning in legal bills, when you realize you can't win, you'll call me. Everyone does eventually. The line went dead. Rocky pulled over, his hands shaking. Phillips wasn't bluffing. The threat was real, immediate. These people would come after everything Rocky loved until he broke, but they didn't understand something. Rocky had already lost the most important thing in his life when Sarah died. He'd already survived the worst pain imaginable, and he'd learned something from that loss. When you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous. Back at Hollow Ridge, Rocky descended to the vault. He sat at Marcus's table, surrounded by $285 million in assets, and made his decision. He wasn't running. He wasn't selling. He was fighting. He opened his laptop and started drafting articles of incorporation for the Marcus Dalton Foundation for Family Support. He detailed the mission, the distribution priorities, the legal structure. He worked through the night, fueled by coffee and determination. By morning, he had a plan, not just to protect the money, but to use it, to build something that would outlast all of them, something that would help families for generations. Walter arrived at dawn as planned. Rocky showed him the documents. It's ambitious, Walter said, reading through the pages. It's also exactly what Marcus would have wanted. Then let's make it happen, Rocky said. Walter looked at him for a long moment. You understand what you're committing to? This fight could take years. It's going to cost you. Financially, emotionally, maybe more. Rocky thought about his kids, about the scared single parents who would benefit from this foundation, about Marcus, who'd sacrificed everything to protect this money, about Sarah, who'd always believed in helping others even when it hurt. I understand, Rocky said, and I'm ready. Over the next month, the battle intensified. Diane's lawsuit expanded, claiming not just ownership of the estate, but right to inspect all contents for inventory purposes. Her lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to force Rocky to reveal what was in the vault. He fought back through James, blocking every attempt. More buyers emerged, offering increasingly absurd amounts: $15 million, $20 million, $30 million for a house assessed at $2 million. Rocky refused them all, and each refusal brought more pressure. Someone tried to hack the mansion's security system. Rocky upgraded it. Someone tried to bribe Janet to report on Rocky's activities with the kids. She told them to go to hell. Someone leaked Rocky's financial troubles to the media, painting him as a broke nobody trying to hold onto property he couldn't afford. Rocky endured it all. Because every day, he and Walter's team were building something real. The foundation documents were drafted. Bank accounts were established. A board of directors was formed from people Marcus had trusted. Slowly, carefully, they were transforming hidden assets into a legal entity that could distribute funds properly. But the conspirators weren't done. They had one more card to play, and it would nearly destroy everything Rocky had built. It came in the form of a judge's order. Citing Diane's lawsuit and concerns about the estate's contents, Judge Catherine Morrison, Senator Morrison's daughter, ordered a full inventory and inspection of Hollow Ridge Estate, including the basement, including any sealed areas. They were coming for the vault. James fought the order, but the judge was unmoved. Rocky had 2 weeks before court-appointed inspectors would arrive with authority to access everything. Walter gathered the team at a safe house in Boulder. We need to move fast, he said. Get the most sensitive evidence out of the vault, secure it somewhere else. But where? Patricia asked. Anywhere we move it, they'll track it down. Rocky had been quiet, thinking. We don't move it, he said finally. We make it public. Everyone turned to stare. Not all of it, Rocky clarified. But enough. We hold a press conference, show the evidence of what was stolen, how it was recovered, what we're planning to do with it. We go public before they can bury it. That's incredibly risky, James warned. You'll be painting a target on yourself. I already have a target on me, Rocky said. At least this way, I'm fighting back. Walter smiled slowly. Marcus would love this. Going on offense, making them react to us instead of the other way around. They spent 2 days preparing. Patricia compiled the most damning financial records. Walter prepared a statement summarizing Marcus's investigation. James drafted legal documents establishing the foundation. And Rocky practiced his speech, the words he'd say to the world about what his great-uncle had done and what Rocky planned to do with the legacy he'd inherited. The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday at a hotel in Denver. Rocky sent invitations to every major news outlet in Colorado. Most ignored them. A few showed up out of curiosity. Rocky stood at a podium in a small conference room, his hands shaking, his voice unsteady at first, but growing stronger as he spoke. My name is Rocky Dalton, he began. 6 weeks ago, I inherited an estate from my great-uncle Marcus, a man I barely knew. What I found there changed my life and revealed a truth that powerful people have spent 15 years trying to hide. He told Marcus's story. The investigation, the theft, the recovery, the threats. He showed documents redacted to protect ongoing investigations, but clear enough to prove the scope of what had happened. He explained the foundation he was building, the mission to help struggling families. This money doesn't belong to me, Rocky said, his voice firm now. It doesn't belong to the people who tried to steal it. It belongs to the American people, and I'm going to make sure it's used to help those who need it most. The room was silent. Then a reporter raised her hand. Mr. Dalton, if what you're saying is true, you're accusing some very powerful people of serious crimes. Aren't you afraid? Rocky looked directly into the camera. Terrified, he admitted. I have 3 kids I'm trying to protect. I'm a single dad who barely made ends meet a month ago. I have no business fighting people this powerful. He paused. But my great-uncle died protecting this legacy, and I'll be damned if I let that sacrifice be for nothing. The press conference went viral. By evening, Rocky's face was on every news channel in the state. By the next morning, it was national. Marcus Dalton's story, buried for 15 years, was finally coming to light. And with that light came both salvation and danger in ways Rocky couldn't yet imagine. The media storm hit like a wildfire. Within 48 hours of Rocky's press conference, every major news outlet in the country was covering the story. Single dad exposes government corruption. Hidden fortune discovered in Colorado mansion. Whistleblower reveals decades-old theft conspiracy. The headlines varied, but the core narrative remained the same. An ordinary man fighting extraordinary power. Rocky's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside Hollow Ridge Estate. Producers offered book deals, movie rights, exclusive interviews. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But Rocky ignored them all. He was too busy preparing for what came next. Because while the media loved him, the people Marcus had exposed hated him. The first retaliation came through official channels. The IRS announced an audit of Rocky's finances going back 7 years. The State Tax Commission opened an investigation into whether Rocky had properly reported his inheritance. Child Protective Services received an anonymous complaint that Rocky's children were living in unsafe conditions. Each attack was carefully coordinated, designed to overwhelm Rocky with legal challenges, while painting him as an irresponsible parent and tax cheat. The message was clear: go public and we'll destroy you. But Rocky had expected this. Walter's team had prepared for every predictable move. They had tax attorneys ready, documentation of Rocky's financial history, character witnesses lined up. Within a week, every allegation had been refuted, every investigation shown to be without merit. The conspirators tried a different approach. Gregory Phillips appeared on national television, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting authority. He spoke with practiced concern about Marcus Dalton's troubled final years, suggesting the old man had been paranoid and delusional. The so-called evidence Rocky had found was likely fabricated, Phillips claimed, and Rocky himself was either a con artist or a confused grieving relative being manipulated by conspiracy theorists. It was a masterful performance. Phillips never directly denied the theft. He just made Rocky seem unreliable, Marcus seem crazy, and the whole story seemed too fantastic to believe. The media began to shift. Some outlets started running skeptical pieces. Questions were raised about Rocky's credibility. Where was the actual proof? Why hadn't he turned everything over to authorities? What if this was all an elaborate hoax? Rocky watched the narrative slip away and felt helpless. He'd shown documents at the press conference, but Phillips had decades of experience manipulating public opinion. Rocky was just a warehouse worker with grease under his nails. Then the allies Marcus had trusted began to emerge. It started with a former Treasury official named Catherine Ling, who'd worked with Marcus in the 90s. She held her own press conference, confirming every detail of Rocky's story. She'd been there, she said. She'd seen the investigation. She'd watched as Marcus was threatened and silenced. And she'd spent 15 years carrying the guilt of not speaking up. Her testimony gave Rocky credibility, but more importantly, it gave other witnesses courage. Within days, 3 more former federal employees came forward. Each one validated parts of Marcus's investigation. Each one described the atmosphere of fear and corruption that had buried the original case. Each one confirmed that Marcus had recovered massive amounts of stolen assets. Phillips tried to discredit them, but there were too many voices now. The story was no longer one man's wild claim. It was a chorus of witnesses describing systematic theft at the highest levels of government. The FBI announced a formal investigation. Special Agent Rebecca Torres arrived at Hollow Ridge on a cold morning in early November. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of quiet intensity that made Rocky nervous. She showed her credentials at the door. "Mr. Dalton, I need to see everything you have. All of Marcus's files, all of the recovered assets, everything." Rocky had been expecting this. He'd discussed it with Walter and James. Turning over evidence to the FBI was risky. The Bureau could bury it, classify it, make it disappear, but keeping it hidden was riskier. Rocky needed official validation that he wasn't making this up. "I'll cooperate fully," Rocky said, "but I need guarantees. I need assurance this evidence won't vanish." Agent Torres smiled slightly. "Mr. Dalton, I've spent 20 years investigating financial crimes. I've seen a lot of corruption, but nothing on this scale. If what you have is real, I promise you, it won't disappear on my watch." Something in her voice made Rocky trust her. He led her down to the vault. Torres spent 3 days at Hollow Ridge, documenting everything. She brought a forensic accountant, a document specialist, and 2 other agents. They catalogued every bearer bond, every gold certificate, every piece of artwork. They copied every file, every recording, every photograph Marcus had collected. When they finished, Torres sat with Rocky in the study. "Your great-uncle was meticulous," she said. "The evidence he gathered is extraordinary. Chain of custody is perfect. Documentation is irrefutable. This is going to result in indictments. Multiple indictments." Rocky exhaled slowly. "So it's real. It's all real. Every bit of it," Torres confirmed. She paused. "Mr. Dalton, you should know. The people you've exposed, they're going to fight harder now. They're facing serious prison time. Desperate people do dangerous things." "I know," Rocky said quietly. "We can offer protection. Witness security." Rocky shook his head. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding. My kids have already been through too much. We're staying here." "Then be careful," Torres warned, "and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." After the FBI left, Rocky felt both relieved and exposed. The evidence was now in official hands, which meant he'd done his duty. But it also meant the conspirators knew time was running out. They'd make their final moves soon. Those moves came faster than Rocky expected. Diane's lawsuit suddenly gained momentum. Judge Catherine Morrison, who'd been sympathetic to Diane's claims, scheduled an emergency hearing. Diana's lawyers argued that since the FBI had seized evidence from the estate, the court needed to place the property in receivership pending resolution of the ownership dispute. It was a transparent attempt to take Hollow Ridge away from Rocky before the foundation could be established. James fought it, but Morrison was determined. She scheduled a full hearing for the following week. Walter pulled Rocky aside after court. Morrison is dirty. Probably was from the beginning. Her father was neck-deep in the original theft. She's not going to rule fairly. Then what do we do? Rocky asked. We go over her head, Walter said. We file in federal court, argue that this is part of a federal investigation now and state courts have no jurisdiction. Will that work? Maybe, Walter admitted. If we get the right judge. They got lucky. The federal case was assigned to Judge Samuel Barrett, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for integrity. He issued a temporary injunction blocking Morrison's order and scheduling his own hearing. But while the legal battles raged, something else was happening, something Rocky didn't see coming. People were responding to his story. Letters started arriving at Hollow Ridge, hundreds of them, then thousands. Single parents writing to say Rocky's fight inspired them. Families who'd been victims of financial crimes thanking him for standing up. Veterans who'd served with honor only to watch corruption go unpunished, expressing gratitude that someone finally cared. And with the letters came donations. Small amounts mostly. $20 here, $50 there. People who didn't have much giving what they could to support the Marcus Dalton Foundation. Emma helped Rocky open the letters each evening. She read them aloud while Tyler and Sophie listened. Dad, this one's from a woman in Ohio. She says her husband died and she has 4 kids, and she's been working 3 jobs just like you did. She sent $10 and says she's praying for us. Rocky's eyes burned. He'd felt so alone in this fight. But these letters reminded him he wasn't alone. Millions of people struggled the way he'd struggled. They understood what this fight meant. One evening, as Rocky read through the latest batch of letters, his phone rang. It was Janet. Rocky, you need to get to my house, now. Something's happened with the kids. Rocky's heart stopped. He was in his truck and speeding down the mountain road before Janet finished the sentence. 20 minutes later, he burst through her door, wild-eyed with fear. What happened? Are they okay? Janet held up her hands. They're fine. Physically fine. But Rocky, someone approached them at school today. Rocky felt ice in his veins. Who? A man claiming to be from social services. He tried to interview Emma and Tyler without permission, asked them questions about living conditions at your house, whether they felt safe, whether you'd been acting strange. Where are they now? Upstairs. Scared but okay. The principal stopped the interview when he realized the man had no proper authorization. Called the police. Rocky took the stairs 3 at a time. His kids were in Janet's guest room huddled together on the bed. When they saw him, Sophie burst into tears. Daddy, she sobbed. That man said you were in trouble. He said we might have to go live somewhere else. Rocky gathered all 3 children into his arms. Listen to me, he said fiercely. Nobody is taking you anywhere. Nobody. We're a family, and we stay together. Understand? Emma's voice was small. But Dad, what if they try again? Then I'll fight them again, Rocky said, and I'll keep fighting until they give up or I can't fight anymore. But I will never, ever let anyone separate us. Tyler looked up at his father. Are we safe here? With Janet? For tonight, Rocky said. But tomorrow, You're coming home. All of us. We're not hiding anymore." That night, Rocky made a decision. Running had been his instinct. Keeping the kids away had seemed smart. But it was also giving the conspirators exactly what they wanted: a family divided, vulnerable, afraid. No more. The next morning, Rocky brought his children home to Hollow Ridge. He upgraded security further, installed panic buttons in every room, taught the kids emergency protocols. If they were going to live in the mansion, they needed to be prepared. But Rocky also did something else. He started living again. He cooked breakfast in the massive kitchen, the four of them laughing as Tyler burned pancakes. He helped Sophie with homework at the dining room table. He threw a football with Tyler in the vast yard. He listened as Emma talked about her dreams of becoming a lawyer someday so she could fight for people like her dad did. Hollow Ridge stopped being a fortress and started being a home. The legal battles continued. Diane's lawyers filed motion after motion. Gregory Phillips appeared on television weekly, undermining Rocky's credibility. Anonymous accounts on social media spread rumors and lies. But something had shifted. The more they attacked, the more support Rocky received. Major donors started contributing to the foundation. Lawyers volunteered their services. Security professionals offered to help protect the property. And then came the moment that changed everything. Judge Barrett scheduled the final hearing on ownership of Hollow Ridge Estate. Both sides would present their cases. He would make a definitive ruling. The courtroom was packed. Diane sat with her legal team on one side. Rocky sat with James and Walter on the other. Media filled the gallery. Agent Torres was there representing the FBI's interest in preserving the evidence. Diane's lawyers went first. They presented contracts allegedly signed by Marcus, promising Diane ownership in exchange for property maintenance. They showed years of invoices for work performed. They argued Rocky had no relationship with Marcus and no right to the estate. Then James stood for Rocky's defense. He presented the will, properly executed and filed. He showed bank records proving Marcus had paid Diane for maintenance services, nothing more. He brought in handwriting experts who testified the supposed contracts were forgeries. But the most powerful moment came when James called Catherine Ling to the stand. "Miss Ling," James began, "did you know Marcus Dalton? I worked with him for 8 years at the Treasury Department. He was my mentor and friend. Did he ever mention his estate or his plans for it?" Catherine nodded. "In 2008, shortly before he went into care, Marcus told me he'd arranged everything. He said his property would go to someone who understood struggle, someone with children, someone who'd use what he'd protected to help others. He said he'd chosen Rocky Dalton because Rocky was who Marcus wished he'd been, a good father, an honest man, and someone brave enough to do what's right even when it's hard." The courtroom was silent. "Did Marcus ever mention Diane or promise her ownership?" James asked. "Never," Catherine said firmly. "Marcus didn't trust easily. He would never have promised his life's work to someone he hadn't thoroughly vetted." Diane's face had gone pale. Judge Barrett called a recess. 2 hours later, he returned with his decision. After reviewing all evidence, testimony, and documentation, Judge Barrett began, "It's clear that Marcus Dalton left his estate to Rocky Dalton in a properly executed will. The contracts presented by the plaintiff appear to be fraudulent and will be referred to the district attorney for investigation." Diane stood suddenly, but her lawyer pulled her back down. "Furthermore," Barrett continued, "given the substantial evidence of attempts to intimidate Mr. Rocky Dalton and interfere with his lawful ownership, this court orders all parties to cease harassment. Any further attempts to challenge this ownership through vexatious litigation will result in sanctions." The gavel came down. Rocky Dalton is the lawful owner of Hollow Ridge Estate and all its contents. Rocky felt tears on his cheeks. Emma grabbed his hand. Walter clapped him on the shoulder. They'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Rocky made a brief statement. Today, justice prevailed. But this fight was never about me or property ownership. It was about protecting something Marcus Dalton died for: the truth. The money recovered and hidden at Hollow Ridge will be used exactly as Marcus intended, to help families in need, to support single parents, to give kids opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. The Marcus Dalton Foundation is real now, and we're going to change lives. The cameras flashed. Questions were shouted, but Rocky just smiled and walked away, his children beside him, his purpose clear. That night, back at Hollow Ridge, the family celebrated. Janet came over with a cake. Walter and his team joined them. Even Agent Torres stopped by briefly to congratulate Rocky. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Rocky stood on the front porch with his kids. The valley spread before them, dark mountains against a starlit sky. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "we did it, right? We really did it?" Rocky pulled her close. "We did, baby. Thanks to a lot of brave people and a little bit of luck." "And Uncle Marcus," Tyler added. "He set this all up." "Yeah," Rocky agreed. "He did. He believed someone would come along who'd finish what he started. I'm just glad it was us." Sophie tugged Rocky's sleeve. "Daddy, can we stay here forever?" Rocky knelt down, looking into his youngest daughter's eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. This is our home now. Nobody's taking it away." But even as he said it, Rocky knew the fight wasn't completely over. Indictments were coming. Trials would follow. Some of the people Marcus had exposed would fight to the bitter end. There would be appeals, more legal battles, maybe more threats. But the foundation was real now. The money was secured. The truth was public, and Rocky had proven he could stand against powerful people and win. More importantly, he'd shown his children something essential: that ordinary people can fight extraordinary evil. That integrity matters more than safety. That sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing. 2 weeks later, the Marcus Dalton Foundation officially launched. The board of directors held their first meeting in Hollow Ridge's grand dining room. Rocky sat at the head of the table, still getting used to the role. They reviewed applications from families needing help, single mothers behind on rent, widowed fathers struggling with medical bills, kids who deserved college educations but couldn't afford them. The needs were overwhelming. But the foundation had resources now, $285 million worth. Properly invested and managed, it could help people for generations. The first grant went to a woman in Texas, a widow with 5 children who'd lost her home after her husband died. The foundation paid off her debt, set up education funds for her kids, and helped her start a small business. When she called to thank Rocky, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. "You saved my family," she kept saying. "You saved us." Rocky held the phone with shaking hands. "It wasn't me," he said. "It was someone who believed broken things could be fixed. I'm just finishing what he started." But that wasn't entirely true. Marcus had saved the money and built the framework. But Rocky had fought for it, protected it, and turned it into something real and active and healing. The warehouse worker who'd once worried about feeding his kids was now changing lives across the country. The single father who'd felt invisible was now inspiring millions. The man who'd inherited a crumbling estate had built a legacy. And through it all, Rocky remained who he'd always been: a father first, a fighter second, and a man who understood that real wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give away. As Christmas approached, Rocky decorated Hollow Ridge with his children. They hung lights on the massive stone exterior, put up a tree in the great room that nearly touched the vaulted ceiling. For the first time in years, the mansion felt truly alive. On Christmas morning, the kids woke to presents under the tree. Not extravagant gifts, just thoughtful ones. Emma got law books she'd wanted. Tyler got a microscope for the science experiments he loved. Sophie got art supplies to feed her creativity. But the real gift was something else. It was safety, security, the knowledge that they'd never be hungry or cold or scared again. the certainty that they belonged somewhere. Rocky watched his children open presents and felt a peace he hadn't known since Sarah died. His wife would be proud, he thought. Not of the money or the mansion, but of the fight, of standing up, of protecting what mattered. Later that day, Rocky visited Sarah's grave for the first time since inheriting the estate. He knelt in the snow and told her everything. About Marcus, about the vault, about the foundation, about how their children had been so brave, so strong. "I did it, babe," he whispered. "I kept them safe. I did the right thing. I made it mean something." The wind whispered through the pines, and for just a moment Rocky could almost hear her voice saying what she always said when he doubted himself. "I always knew you would." The new year arrived cold and clear over Hollow Ridge Estate. Rocky stood at his bedroom window, watching the sun rise over the mountains, coffee steaming in his hands. 6 months had passed since the court ruling. 6 months since the foundation officially launched. 6 months since his life had transformed from desperate survival to purposeful mission. But the fight wasn't over. It was just entering its final phase. The FBI investigation had moved with unexpected speed. Agent Torres had assembled a task force of 20 agents, forensic accountants, and prosecutors. Marcus's evidence had given them everything they needed: names, dates, transactions, recordings. By January, the first indictments came down. Gregory Phillips was arrested at his home in Virginia. The charges included wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, and money laundering. Prosecutors alleged he'd stolen or diverted over $150 million in recovered assets between 1992 and 2008. Then came Judge Catherine Morrison, arrested in her chambers. She'd used her position to protect conspirators and obstruct investigations into the original theft. Her father's involvement had made her complicit in the cover-up. Within 2 weeks, 12 more indictments followed. Former Treasury officials, retired senators, corporate executives who'd received stolen funds. The conspiracy Marcus had exposed was finally facing justice. Rocky watched the news coverage with mixed emotions. Part of him felt vindicated. These people had threatened his family, tried to steal his inheritance, attempted to silence the truth. They deserved punishment. But another part of him just felt sad. So much corruption, so many betrayals of public trust. Marcus had spent years documenting it all, and it had cost him everything: his career, his freedom, his peace of mind. He'd died alone in a care facility, wondering if anyone would ever finish what he'd started. Rocky made a decision. He wouldn't let Marcus's sacrifice be forgotten. He worked with a local sculptor to design a memorial. It would stand in the estate's garden, a bronze statue of Marcus holding a set of keys. Beneath would be an inscription: Marcus Dalton, 1942 to 2024. Protector of the forgotten, champion of justice. He hid the truth so it could one day be revealed. The unveiling was scheduled for late February. Rocky invited everyone who'd helped: Walter and his team, Catherine Ling, Agent Torres, even some of the families the foundation had already helped. But first, Rocky had another ceremony to attend. The Marcus Dalton Foundation was opening its first regional office in Denver. It would serve as headquarters for the Western United States, coordinating grants, processing applications, and providing support services for struggling families. Rocky had hired a staff of 12, including social workers, accountants, and case managers. The office opening drew media attention. Rocky stood at a podium in the lobby, uncomfortable in a suit Emma had insisted he wear. 6 months ago, Rocky began, I was a single father working 2 jobs and barely keeping my head above water. I know what it's like to choose between electricity and groceries. I know what it's like to tell your kids we can't afford birthday presents. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like the system doesn't care if you succeed or fail. The crowd was silent, listening. The Marcus Dalton Foundation exists because my great-uncle understood that struggle. He spent his career fighting for justice, and when that fight cost him everything, he protected what he'd recovered, so that someday it could help people like me, like you, like every family barely hanging on. Rocky gestured to the office behind him. This building represents a promise that struggling families aren't alone, that single parents have support, that kids don't have to go hungry because their mum or dad can't work 3 jobs. We're going to help people, not just with money, but with dignity, with respect, with the understanding that needing help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The applause was thunderous, but what touched Rocky most were the tears. He saw people crying in the audience, people who understood exactly what he meant because they'd lived it too. After the ceremony, a young woman approached him. She was maybe 25, holding a toddler on her hip. "Mr. Dalton," she said, her voice shaking, "I'm Jessica. The foundation. You paid off my medical debt last month. $8,000. I thought I'd be paying it off until my daughter was grown." She started crying. "You gave me my life back." Rocky felt his own eyes burning. That's what Marcus wanted, what he fought for. I'm just honored to help make it happen. Over the following weeks, the foundation's impact grew exponentially. Rocky reviewed applications every evening, reading stories that broke his heart and inspired his determination. There was Michael, a widower with 3 kids who'd lost his job after taking time off to care for his dying wife. The foundation paid 6 months of his rent and enrolled him in job training. There was Angela, a single mother of twins who'd been living in her car. The foundation secured her an apartment, provided furniture, and set up childcare so she could work. There was David, a veteran struggling with PTSD who couldn't afford therapy. The foundation connected him with services and paid for treatment. Each story was different. Each need was unique. But the common thread was the same. People who'd been invisible were finally being seen. People who'd been forgotten were finally being remembered. The foundation's work attracted attention beyond just those it helped. Corporations started reaching out, offering matching donations. Celebrities endorsed the cause. Other charitable organizations wanted to partner on projects. Rocky was careful about which opportunities to accept. He remembered Marcus's warnings about trusting the wrong people. Every partnership was vetted. Every donation was scrutinized. The foundation's integrity had to remain uncompromised. But Rocky also understood the power of collaboration. Working with Habitat for Humanity, the foundation funded construction of affordable housing. Partnering with community colleges, they established scholarship programs for single parents returning to school. Collaborating with healthcare providers, they created clinics offering free services to low-income families. Hollow Ridge Estate itself transformed. The West Wing was converted into a family resource center. Social workers held office hours there 3 days a week. Job training workshops happened in the converted carriage house. The massive kitchen became a teaching space for culinary classes that helped people develop employable skills. Emma, now 13, volunteered at the resource center after school. She helped families fill out applications, played with children while their parents met with counselors, and organized donation drives. Rocky watched his daughter blossom into a young woman with purpose and compassion. Tyler, at 10, had become fascinated with the foundation's financial operations. He sat with the accountants, asking questions about investments and grant distributions. He already talked about becoming a financial advisor someday so he could help people manage money wisely. Sophie, now 7, brought a different kind of magic. She drew pictures for every family the foundation helped. Bright, colorful images of houses and families and sunshine. Rocky had them framed and sent along with grant award letters. Families wrote back saying Sophie's drawings hung in places of honor in their homes. Rocky's children had found purpose in the struggle. They'd learned that hardship could be transformed into hope that pain could become power, that their father's fight had meant something bigger than just their own survival. One evening in March, Rocky gathered the kids in Marcus's study. He'd been meaning to have this conversation for weeks, but kept putting it off. Now felt like the right time. "I want to talk to you about Uncle Marcus," Rocky began, "about what he did and why it matters." The kids settled on the couch, listening. Marcus spent years fighting corruption. He recovered money that had been stolen and hid it here to keep it safe. "But there's something I haven't told you about why he chose us." Emma leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Rocky pulled out a folder he'd found in the vault, one he'd kept private until now. Inside were letters Marcus had written but never sent. Letters to Rocky's father, Marcus's nephew. Letters asking about family, expressing regret for being distant, wondering about the grandnephews and grandniece he'd never met. Marcus wasn't just some isolated stranger, Rocky explained. He cared about family. He just didn't know how to show it. "When he learned about your mom's death, about our struggles, something changed. He realized he could do something meaningful with what he'd protected. He could help us." "Why didn't he just contact us?" Tyler asked. "Why all the secrets?" "Because he was protecting you," Rocky said. "If the people looking for this money had known Marcus had living relatives, they would have targeted you. He stayed away to keep you safe. But he never stopped watching, never stopped caring." Sophie's eyes were wide. "So he was like a secret guardian angel?" Rocky smiled. "Yeah, baby, something like that." Emma's voice was quiet. "Do you think he knew you'd do all this? The foundation, helping people?" Rocky looked at Marcus's letters, at the careful handwriting, at the words expressing hope that Rocky would understand the gift being left behind. "Yeah," Rocky said softly. "I think he knew exactly what I'd do. He just had faith I'd find the courage to do it." That night, Rocky sat alone in the study, looking at Marcus's photograph. The young soldier in the picture seemed to stare back, his eyes holding secrets and sadness and strength. "I hope I'm making you proud," Rocky whispered. "I hope this is what you wanted." The photograph offered no answer, but Rocky didn't need one. He knew in his bones that Marcus's spirit lived on in every family helped, every child fed, every parent given hope. The foundation wasn't just Rocky's work, it was Marcus's legacy finally fulfilled. The trials began in April. Gregory Phillips was first. The prosecution presented mountains of evidence: Marcus's documentation, FBI forensics, testimony from dozens of witnesses. The case was airtight. Rocky attended every day of the trial. He sat in the gallery watching Phillips try to maintain his dignified facade as witness after witness described his crimes. The moment that shattered Rocky's heart came when Catherine Ling testified about the original theft. She described how she and Marcus had discovered the missing funds, how they'd reported it up the chain of command, how they'd been told to drop the investigation. "Marcus wouldn't let it go," Catherine said, her voice breaking. "He believed in justice. He believed the system would work if good people fought hard enough. When he realized the system was broken, it nearly destroyed him. But he didn't give up. He just changed tactics." The defense tried to paint Marcus as a paranoid conspiracy theorist. They showed evidence of his isolation, his elaborate security measures, his refusal to trust official channels. But the prosecution countered with one simple truth. Marcus had been right. About everything. The conspiracy was real. The theft had happened. Powerful people had stolen from the American people, and Marcus had stopped them the only way he could. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Phillips stood stone-faced as the judge read the verdict. But Rocky saw his hands shaking. The man who'd threatened Rocky's children, who'd offered millions to make Rocky disappear, who'd spent 15 years trying to recover stolen money, had finally lost. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge showed no mercy. Phillips received 25 years in federal prison. At 68 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. As Phillips was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at Rocky. His expression held no remorse, only hatred. Rocky met his gaze steadily. He felt no satisfaction in another man's downfall, just relief that the threat was finally neutralized. The other trials followed through spring and summer. Judge Catherine Morrison received 12 years. 3 former Treasury officials received sentences ranging from 8 to 18 years. By August, every major conspirator Marcus had documented was either convicted or had accepted plea deals. The Department of Justice held a press conference celebrating the successful prosecution. They praised the FBI's work, Marcus's documentation, and Rocky's courage in coming forward. But Rocky knew the truth. This victory belonged to one man, Marcus Dalton, who'd sacrificed everything to protect evidence until someone brave enough or desperate enough or stubborn enough would use it properly. The memorial unveiling happened on a perfect September afternoon. Over 200 people gathered in Hollow Ridge's garden. Former federal agents, families helped by the foundation, journalists who'd covered the story, community members who'd supported Rocky's fight. The statue stood 8 feet tall, covered in a white drape. Rocky stood beside it with his children, nervous about speaking, but determined to do Marcus justice. "My great-uncle Marcus," Rocky began, voice amplified by microphone, was a complicated man. Quiet, private, some would say paranoid. But everything he did was driven by one core belief: that truth matters, that justice matters, that protecting what's right is worth any personal cost. Rocky gestured to the covered statue. This memorial isn't just about one man. It's about the principle he died defending. That ordinary people can stand against extraordinary corruption. That one person with courage and conviction can change the world. That secrets kept for the right reasons are worth protecting until the right time. Emma, Tyler, and Sophie stepped forward. Together they pulled the drape away. The bronze Marcus stood tall, keys held out in one hand, as if offering them to whoever was brave enough to accept. His face was stern but kind, his posture strong despite the weight he'd carried. The inscription caught the afternoon light: Marcus Dalton. He hid the truth so it could one day be revealed. The crowd applauded, many wept. Catherine Ling approached the statue, placed her hand on the bronze, and bowed her head in silent gratitude. Afterward, people lingered. They told stories about Marcus, about how his work had impacted their lives. Some had never met him but felt connected to his mission. Others had known him briefly and treasured those memories. One elderly man approached Rocky with tears streaming down his weathered face. "I worked with Marcus in '89, he said. "Best investigator I ever knew. But more than that, he was a good man. He cared about people. I'm so glad someone finally told his real story." Rocky shook the man's hand, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. That evening, after everyone had left, Rocky sat alone in the garden. The statue stood sentinel in the fading light, Marcus's bronze eyes seeming to watch over the estate he'd protected for so long. "We did it," Rocky whispered. "We finished what you started. I hope wherever you are, you can finally rest." A breeze moved through the trees, gentle and warm despite the autumn chill. Rocky chose to believe it was Marcus's way of saying thank you. By October, the Marcus Dalton Foundation had helped over 500 families. The impact rippled outward in ways Rocky couldn't have predicted. Kids stayed in school because their families had stability. Parents found jobs because they could afford training and childcare. Communities strengthened because people had hope again. But the foundation's work revealed something else. The scale of need was overwhelming. For every family they helped, 10 more needed assistance. Poverty, debt, medical crises, the problems seemed endless. Rocky struggled with the weight of it. He wanted to help everyone but couldn't. Resources, even $285 million, had limits. Walter found him one evening in the study, staring at applications he couldn't fund. "You can't save everyone," Walter said gently. "I know," Rocky replied, "but I can't stop thinking about the ones we can't help. The families who apply and get rejected. What happens to them? Some find help elsewhere. Some figure it out on their own. Some struggle until they can't anymore." Walter sat down. "But Rocky, think about the 500 families you have helped. Think about those kids who'll finish school now, those parents who'll keep their homes, those people who'll remember someone cared when they needed it most." Rocky nodded but couldn't shake the sadness. "Marcus understood this," Walter continued. "That's why he left such detailed plans. He knew you couldn't save everyone, but you could create a model that inspires others. You could show what's possible when resources meet compassion. You could prove the system can work if designed properly." Rocky looked up. "You're saying this is bigger than just our foundation?" "I'm saying you've already changed the conversation. Other charities are copying your model. Corporations are increasing charitable giving. Politicians are proposing legislation to help struggling families. You've shown people what real impact looks like. And that," Walter said firmly, "is exactly what Marcus hoped you'd do." The realization shifted something in Rocky. He couldn't help everyone, but he could inspire many to help some. The foundation's impact wasn't limited to its direct grants. It was in the movement it sparked. Rocky redoubled his efforts to share the foundation's work. He accepted speaking engagements, not for fame, but to spread the message. He wrote articles about effective charitable giving. He consulted with other organizations on best practices, and he trained a leadership team to run the foundation's daily operations. Rocky had never wanted to be CEO of anything. He was a father first, a mechanic at heart. He needed people more qualified to handle growth and expansion. By November, the foundation employed 43 people across 3 regional offices. Rocky focused on strategic vision, while talented professionals handled implementation. It felt right delegating to experts while maintaining Marcus's core mission. Thanksgiving arrived with the first heavy snow. Hollow Ridge Estate looked like something from a postcard, all white drifts and smoke curling from stone chimneys. Rocky invited everyone who'd supported the journey: Walter's team, Agent Torres, Catherine Ling, Janet, families the foundation had helped. The massive dining table, once empty and sad, now held 23 people. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for decades. Children ran through halls where Marcus had once walked alone. Before dinner, Rocky stood to speak. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. "A year ago," he began, "I was barely surviving, working myself to death, wondering how to keep my kids fed, feeling like the world had forgotten people like us existed." He looked around the table at faces that had become family. "Then I inherited this place, found a fortune I never expected, discovered a legacy I didn't understand. And scared as I was, I made a choice: to fight, to protect what Marcus had died for, to turn suffering into purpose." Rocky's eyes found his children. Emma, Tyler, and Sophie looked back at him with pride shining in their faces. None of this would have happened without help, without people who believed in a broke single dad with more stubbornness than sense. He smiled through tears. "So before we eat, I want to say thank you to everyone here. You didn't just help me. You helped prove that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they work together." Walter raised his glass. To Marcus, to Rocky, to justice finally served. The toast echoed around the table. To Marcus, to Rocky, to justice. They ate and laughed and told stories late into the night. Emma helped serve pie. Tyler entertained younger children with magic tricks. Sophie showed everyone her latest drawings of families the foundation had helped. Watching his children interact with this chosen family, Rocky felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Complete, whole, home. Later, After guests had left and kids were asleep, Rocky walked through the quiet mansion. He paused in each room, remembering the journey. The terror of that first night when Diane broke in. The wonder of discovering the vault. The fear when intruders came. The relief of the court victory. He ended in Marcus's study, now Rocky's office. The old photograph still sat on the desk. Rocky picked it up, studying the young soldier's face. "I understand now," Rocky said softly, "why you chose us. It wasn't random. You saw in me what I couldn't see in myself. Strength, courage, the ability to stand when everything said to run." Rocky set the photo down gently. "I'm going to make sure your name is remembered, Uncle Marcus. Not as the paranoid recluse people thought you were, but as the hero you actually were." Christmas came with more snow and more joy than Rocky had known possible. The foundation gave bonuses to all staff. Rocky personally delivered gifts to families they'd helped, showing up unannounced to share the holiday spirit. On Christmas Eve, Rocky took his children to Sarah's grave. They'd started a tradition of visiting whenever something important happened. "Mom," Emma said, kneeling in the snow, "Dad did it. He saved us. He helped so many people. You'd be so proud." Tyler added his own message. "We live in a mansion now, but we didn't forget where we came from. We remember being scared and hungry, and we're helping other kids who feel like that." Sophie placed a drawing on the headstone. It showed their family, including Sarah as an angel watching over them, and a figure that could only be Marcus standing beside her. Rocky's vision blurred. "You were right, babe," he whispered. "You always said things happen for a reason, that hard times make us stronger, that helping others heals our own pain." He paused. "I miss you every day, but I can feel you smiling. I can feel you proud." The wind whispered through bare branches. Snow fell softly, and for a moment Rocky could swear he felt Sarah's hand on his shoulder, warm and real and loving. As the new year approached, Rocky reflected on everything that had changed. 12 months ago, he'd been a desperate man with 3 kids and no hope. Now he ran a foundation changing lives across the country. He'd exposed corruption at the highest levels. He'd protected a legacy worth more than money. But the most important change wasn't external, it was internal. Rocky had discovered he was stronger than he'd ever imagined, braver than he'd believed possible, capable of standing against forces that should have crushed him. And his children had learned lessons no classroom could teach. That integrity matters, that courage isn't the absence of fear but action despite it, that one person really can make a difference. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks exploded over the valley, Rocky gathered his children on the front porch. "What's your New Year's resolution, Dad?" Emma asked. Rocky considered. "To never forget where we came from, to stay humble, to keep fighting for people who can't fight for themselves." "Mine's to be a lawyer like you," Emma said, "to help people the way you do. I'm going to learn everything about managing money so I can help the foundation grow," Tyler declared. Sophie hugged Rocky's leg. "I'm going to keep drawing pictures. They make people happy." Rocky pulled them all close. "You know what Marcus's greatest gift was? It wasn't the money or the house. It was showing us that our struggles matter, that our pain has purpose, that we can take the worst moments of our lives and transform them into hope for others." The fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors: red, gold, silver, blue, explosions of light against darkness. "Anyone can change the world if they're stubborn enough to stand their ground and brave enough to speak the truth," Rocky said softly. "Marcus proved that. And now we're going to keep proving it every single day." Months turned to years. The foundation grew exponentially. By its 5th anniversary, it had helped over 10,000 families. Other organizations had adopted its model. Legislation based on its principles had passed in 3 states. Emma graduated high school with honors and headed to law school. Tyler won a scholarship to study finance. Sophie's artwork was featured in exhibitions raising money for charity. Rocky remained at Hollow Ridge, guiding the foundation, but also simply being present. He'd remarried a kind woman named Rachel, who understood his mission and shared his values. Together they made the mansion a true home, filled with warmth and purpose. But Rocky never forgot the journey. He kept Marcus's photograph on his desk. He visited Sarah's grave monthly. He stayed connected to the families the foundation helped, attending graduations and weddings and celebrations. And every year on the anniversary of finding the vault, Rocky gathered the original team. Walter, Catherine, James, Agent Torres, Janet. They'd share a meal, tell stories, remember the fight. One year, when Rocky was 45 and the foundation was celebrating its 8th year, Walter asked him a question. "Do you ever regret it, taking on this burden? Your life could have been so much simpler." Rocky looked around the table at faces that had become family. He thought about the 10,000 families helped. He thought about his children, grown and purposeful and kind. "Not for a second," Rocky said. "This burden, as you call it, gave me everything that matters. Purpose, family, legacy." He smiled. "Marcus didn't just leave me money. He left me a reason to be better than I thought I could be." "And that," Walter said, raising his glass, "is exactly what he hoped you'd say." As the sun set over Hollow Ridge that evening, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose, Rocky stood alone in the garden beside Marcus's statue. The bronze had weathered beautifully, developing a patina that made Marcus seem even more dignified. "We made it," Rocky whispered. "We took what you protected and made it mean something. We helped people. We changed lives. We proved that one person's courage can ripple outward forever." The keys in Marcus's bronze hand caught the fading light. "And Uncle Marcus," Rocky continued, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for showing me that struggles have purpose. Thank you for teaching me that the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's the strength to use that wealth to lift others." The garden was quiet, except for birdsong and distant laughter from the house where Rachel and the kids were preparing dinner. Rocky had come to Hollow Ridge a broken man with nothing but survival instincts and love for his children. He'd found a fortune hidden beneath flaws, but the real treasure had been discovering his own capacity for courage, for leadership, for transforming pain into power. Because sometimes the strongest heroes aren't the loudest. They're the single parents working 3 jobs. They're the people who keep going when everything says to quit. They're the ordinary souls who find themselves holding extraordinary responsibility and choose to rise rather than run. And sometimes the girl or guy who inherits a secluded valley estate with $285 million locked below doesn't just become rich. They become the person who rebuilds hope, restores justice, and reminds the world that one voice speaking truth can drown out 1,000 lies. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to protect what matters, strong enough to stand alone, and wise enough to know that real legacy isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives transformed, families saved, and hope restored to those who'd lost it. As the stars emerged above Hollow Ridge Estate, Rocky walked back toward the house where his family waited. He was no longer the desperate single dad who'd opened a certified letter in fear. He was the man who'd faced corruption and won, who'd protected a legacy and expanded it, who'd taken one person's sacrifice and multiplied it into a movement. The journey that began with inheritance had become something greater. It had become a testament to what ordinary people can achieve when they refuse to surrender, refuse to compromise, refuse to let fear win. Because for Rocky and for everyone he'd helped, the vault beneath Hollow Ridge hadn't just held money, it had held possibility, and that possibility, carefully protected and wisely shared, had changed everything. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe the truth deserves a voice and ordinary people can do extraordinary things.